We all wake up some days and feel nothing, no spark, no energy, no desire to chase the very goals we once obsessed over. The calendar reminds you of what you committed to. The world continues moving, but inside there's a heaviness, a blank space where motivation used to live. And in those moments, the voice that asks, "Why am I doing this?" grows louder. Not the strategic why that inspires us, but the desperate kind, the tired kind. The voice that wants permission to pause indefinitely. This is the very moment that separates those who lead from those who merely show up. Because anyone can act when they feel inspired. Anyone can work when they're excited. But the people who consistently push through, even when the fire is gone, those are the ones who build something real. We've been taught to chase passion, to follow the spark. But we forget that sparks fade. Passion is not a constant flame. It flickers, it falters, it can be blown out by fatigue, fear, or even boredom. The truth is, the reason we must force ourselves to work when we don't feel like it is because the mission is still worth it. The purpose hasn't changed. Only our temporary emotional state has. It's not about toxic productivity or glorifying burnout. It's about understanding something deeper. We don't work because we feel like it. We work because we believe in something bigger than comfort. We believe in showing up for something that matters. Think about this. If your reason for doing the work is fragile enough to be shaken by a bad morning or a tired mind, then maybe the reason itself wasn't strong enough. But if your why is rooted in service, in contribution, in legacy, then no feeling, no matter how strong, can erase that. You don't build trust with yourself by doing what's easy. You build it by keeping promises when no one's watching, when you don't feel like it, when every bone in your body says, "Not today," and you still show up. That's integrity. That's leadership. In the early stages of any pursuit, business, health, relationships, there's a rush. New beginnings come with adrenaline. But after the high wears off, what are you left? You're left with routine, with repetition, with the quiet moments that don't feel glorious or groundbreaking. And it's in those exact moments that your purpose becomes your only compass. Not your mood, not your excitement, but the clarity of why you started. Now, there's a story I often reflect on, not about someone famous or decorated, but about a young woman who was building her own nonprofit. She wasn't getting paid, she worked nights and weekends. She struggled to secure donors. Most mornings she woke up overwhelmed, but she forced herself to sit down and write those emails, to follow up, to make one more phone call. And when I asked her why, she didn't say because I enjoy the grind. She said, because if I don't do it, someone suffers. A real person, a child, a family, a life I can help. I can't let my temporary feeling be bigger than their permanent need. That's what purpose does. It reframes the moment. It gives weight to action when motivation is absent. But it starts with asking yourself the real question, not what do I want today, but what do I believe in enough to endure today's resistance? Purpose isn't always a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's buried under stress, fatigue, and doubt. But if you dig deep enough, it's always there, waiting to be remembered, waiting to be honored. This is the shift we must make. Stop asking for motivation to arrive before you move. Decide to move first, and trust that the feeling may follow. Or it may not, but move anyway. Do the work anyway. Because the discipline of showing up, even on the worst days, is what builds trust, not just with others, but with yourself. Think about your future self, 10 years from now. That version of you isn't going to thank you for every time you felt good and worked. They're going to thank you for the mornings you showed up, despite every fiber of your being telling you not to. That's the version of you that builds something lasting, something meaningful. It's easy to work when we feel like it, but those moments don't define us. The hard ones do. The mornings we get out of bed, not because we feel inspired, but because we remember the commitment we made. The evenings we sit down to write, create, build, not because it's thrilling, but because it's necessary. That's where the real work happens. That's where transformation lives. So the next time you don't feel like it, Don't panic. Don't question your entire direction. Just pause. Remember your why. Take one step, then another. Not for the applause, not for the metrics, but because you've decided that this thing you're building matters enough to be uncomfortable for. In the end, no one is coming to push you forward. The world will not rearrange itself for your convenience, but that's okay, because you have something better than constant motivation. You have purpose, and purpose is a far more reliable engine. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it endures. And sometimes that's all you need, a quiet reason to begin again, even when you don't feel like it. When we hear the word discipline, most of us flinch. It sounds rigid, harsh, even oppressive. Somewhere along the way, we started associating discipline with self-denial or punishment. We think of it as the thing that strips life of joy, but that's a misunderstanding. Discipline isn't something you do to yourself. It's something you do for yourself. Discipline is not a lack of freedom. It's the ultimate form of freedom. It means you are choosing long-term fulfillment over short-term relief. It means you've decided to stop negotiating with your feelings every morning. It's a decision, a quiet, steady one, to honor your future self, even when your present self is tired, distracted, or discouraged. There's this idea that love only looks like comfort, that being good to yourself means giving yourself a break. Sometimes that's true. Rest is necessary. Compassion matters. But love also looks like holding yourself to a higher standard, not because you're not enough as you are, but because you believe you're capable of more. Because you care too much about the person you're becoming to let temporary feelings write your story. When you force yourself to work, especially when you don't feel like it, what you're really doing is casting a vote for your future. You're saying, I care enough about where I'm going that I'm willing to be uncomfortable right now. That kind of love is quiet. It doesn't get likes or attention, but it builds something real. The truth is, the easy thing is rarely the meaningful thing. It's easy to say, I'm not in the mood today. It's easy to push tasks to tomorrow. But every time you do that, you're leaving your future self with a heavier burden. Every time you choose ease over effort, you delay the version of you who's trying to break through. Let's make this personal. Think of someone you deeply admire. Not because of what they've accomplished, but because of how they carry themselves, how they lead, how they show up, how they persist. That person didn't get there on feelings alone. They weren't always motivated. They weren't always excited. But they respected their future self enough to keep going. They didn't let how they felt interfere with who they wanted to become. That's the essence of discipline. It's not about controlling yourself. It's about caring for yourself. Discipline is love in action. It's saying you matter, your goals matter, your peace, your strength, your growth. They matter enough to work for, even when it's hard. There's a kind of pride that only comes from doing something you didn't want to do, but did anyway. You didn't wait for the right mood or the perfect conditions. You just showed up. And in that act, you proved to yourself that you can be trusted, that you don't quit on your own future, that you take yourself seriously. People often say, I need to be more disciplined, as if it's a skill they lack. But what they're really missing is the reason to be disciplined. You can't force yourself into habits you hate unless they're tied to something you love. That's where most people fail. They try to build discipline around what they should do instead of what they believe in. They rely on pressure instead of purpose. But when your discipline is rooted in love, in devotion to your future, your family, your mission, it becomes less of a burden and more of a responsibility. You stop seeing it as something you have to do and start treating it as something you get to do, a way to serve something bigger than your mood. Sometimes the best way to care for yourself is to challenge yourself, not cruelly, but intentionally. With compassion, yes, but also with courage, saying, I believe in your potential so much, I'm not going to let you sit this one out. Not today. That's what discipline says. That's what love says. Now, there will always be people who say just go with the flow, and sometimes that's wise, but there are other times Many times when the flow leads nowhere, when going with the flow means giving in to distraction or fear or comfort, discipline is what gives you the power to step out of that current and walk your own path, even when it's uphill. What if instead of asking, how do I get more disciplined, you started asking, what do I care about enough to stay committed to? The answer to that question will always lead you to your discipline, because it's not about grinding for the sake of it. It's about honoring the things that matter most to you, even when it's hard. When you understand this, your perspective shifts. Work isn't something you force. It's something you return to again and again because it's tied to your identity. You don't just work because you have to. You work because it's who you are. You show up because your future is counting on you. That's not pressure, that's purpose. There will be days you don't want to do it, and that's okay. You're human. But let those days be part of your journey, not the end of it. Show up anyway, not perfectly, but intentionally. Not to prove anything to others, but to stay true to yourself. Discipline isn't loud, it doesn't boast. But over time, it builds something that noise never could. Trust, self-respect, peace. A deep, quiet pride that comes from knowing I did what I said I would, even when it was hard, even when I didn't feel like it. I showed up. That's not punishment. That's power. And it all starts with love. Not the soft, romantic kind, but the kind that's willing to do hard things. The kind that chooses responsibility over ease. The kind that wakes up early, puts the phone down, says no to comfort and yes to purpose. So if you don't feel like working today, that's okay. But ask yourself, what does the version of me I respect want me to do right now? And do that. Not because it's easy, not because it feels good, but because you matter enough to choose something better. You don't force yourself because you hate yourself. You force yourself because you love who you're becoming. Most of us have been taught to wait. Wait for the right moment. Wait for inspiration. Wait until we feel like it. And we've been sold this idea quietly and repeatedly that motivation must come first. That we need to feel good before we can do good. But that's not how progress works. That's not how meaningful things are built. If we only worked when we were motivated, we'd do very little. The truth is, the people who build extraordinary things, who write books, start companies, lead teams, run marathons, don't rely on motivation. They rely on motion. They understand a simple but powerful truth. Motivation doesn't create action. Action creates motivation. It's a reversal of what we've been taught, but when you experience it, everything changes. The first step is the hardest, not because it's physically difficult, but because it feels pointless. You sit down to work and the energy isn't there. The inspiration is absent. You want to wait for the spark, but you've waited long enough to know that sometimes the spark never comes. That's when discipline steps in. Not as a punishment, but as a strategy. You take one step, not because you feel inspired, but because you've learned that starting is the only thing that leads to progress. There's something almost magical that happens in that moment. You open the document, make the call, lace up your shoes. And slowly, very slowly, your body starts to follow. Your mind begins to focus. Your emotions shift. And then, without fully realizing it, motivation arrives. But only after movement, and only after you chose to begin without it. Whatever this part is, this is the part we forget. We think we need to be in the right state to start. But often it's the starting that gets us into the right state. Motivation is not a precondition. It's a byproduct. It's what comes after you've already proven to yourself that you're willing to show up, and that's exactly what most people miss. They're waiting to feel like working before they take the first step. And so they wait, and nothing changes, because nothing starts. You don't need to feel ready to begin. Readiness is a myth. What you need is a reason to begin. And a willingness to do it badly at first. That's it. That's the formula. You begin, it feels awkward, messy, dull, but you keep going. And somewhere in that process you find rhythm. You find clarity. You remember why you started. We romanticize creativity, discipline, even leadership. We imagine people walking around in a constant state of inspiration, but that's not reality. The real story, the honest one, is far simpler. People who make things happen simply start before they feel like it. They trust the process. They don't wait to feel good to do good. A writer who only writes when they're inspired will finish very few pages. An entrepreneur who only takes action when they feel confident will launch nothing. A parent who only shows up when they feel emotionally strong will miss the most important moments. Real impact is made not by people who feel great all the time, but by those who move forward anyway. It's easy to assume that motivation is what successful people have that others don't. But motivation is fleeting. No one has it all the time. What they have instead is clarity. They know what they're doing and why they're doing it. That's what makes them move, even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or uncertain. The beautiful irony is that the very act of working often creates the motivation we're looking for. When you act, you send a signal to your brain that this matters, that it's worth energy, attention, and effort. Your brain responds, your emotions shift, confidence builds, not because something external changed, but because you created momentum. Momentum is everything. Not speed, not perfection, just movement. Just choosing to engage when your mind tells you to delay. That first action might be small. Writing a single sentence, opening the spreadsheet, stretching for 5 minutes. But that's how the engine starts. That's how inertia gives way to energy. Every day, you have the decision to make. Will I wait to feel ready, or will I begin now, as I am? That one question defines progress. Because feelings are real, but they're also unreliable. They change with the weather, your sleep, your stress levels, even what you ate. But action cuts through all of that. It's something you control. It's your anchor. There's a deeper reason why this matters. It's not just about getting more done. It's about who you become in the process. When you learn to act without waiting for motivation, you're building a new kind of confidence. Not the shallow kind that comes from compliments or outcomes, the deep kind that comes from knowing I don't have to feel perfect to do what matters. I can move forward even when I'm unsure. That's what resilience looks like. That's what leadership is. And that's what builds long-term success. No one is asking you to be a machine. This isn't about ignoring your emotions or suppressing your needs. This is about reclaiming your agency. Understanding that you are not a passive participant in your own life, that you don't have to sit around waiting for the right emotion to bless you with productivity. So the next time you find yourself saying, I'm just not feeling it today, recognize that as a signal, not a stop sign. It's okay to feel off, it's normal, but that doesn't mean you're stuck. You're never stuck. You're always one action away from movement. And movement changes everything. You don't need motivation to start, you just need to start. And then, almost always, motivation will find you. Not before, but because you moved. There's a quiet form of leadership that doesn't get talked about often. It doesn't happen on a stage, it's not applauded or rewarded. It happens in the invisible spaces when no one's watching. It happens in the early mornings when you choose to get out of bed despite feeling overwhelmed. It happens in the evenings when you return to the work, even though part of you wants to give up. This is where real leadership is born. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows of discomfort and resistance. People think leadership is about influence, about vision, about strategy, and it is. But before all of that, leadership begins with the decision to show up when it would be easier not to keep your word, to honor the commitment you made, not because it's convenient, but because it matters. Especially on the days when it's the last thing you want to do. We've all had those moments when your body is tired, your mind is scattered, when the weight of the day feels too heavy and you wonder if taking a break, pushing it off, or just stopping altogether is the wiser option. And maybe sometimes it is. Rest matters. But other times it's not rest that we need, it's courage. The courage to do the hard thing, the boring thing, the necessary thing. This is the test that no one talks about. The test that comes not at the start, but somewhere in the middle, when the novelty has worn off, when the results are slow, and when you start to question why you began in the first place. That's the test of commitment. And how you respond to it shapes who you become. People are always watching, even when you don't realize it. Your kids, your teammates, your peers, they're not watching how you perform when you're at your best. They're watching what you do when it's hard, when you're tired, when things don't go your way. And most importantly, you're watching every time you show up despite resistance. You're reinforcing a message to yourself, I can be trusted. I don't quit when it's hard. I lead by example, not excuse. That's what leadership is. It's not about telling others what to do. It's about being the kind of person who does the hard thing first. The kind of person who makes discipline visible, who makes integrity normal, who doesn't just speak about commitment, but embodies it. You don't need a title to lead. You need to be willing to carry the weight even when no one else will. You need to step forward when others hesitate, to act on principle, not pressure. Because true leadership isn't about how many people follow you, it's about the standard you choose to live by. That standard is revealed in the moments when showing up is inconvenient. It's easy to be motivated when you're winning, when the results are coming in. But what about when they're not? What about when progress is slow and doubt creeps in? That's when your example matters most. That's when people around you, even if they never say it, are watching and asking, will they still show up? Do they still believe? And if the answer is yes, if you keep moving, even quietly, even imperfectly, you give people something rare. You give them belief. Not belief in you, but belief in what's possible for them. That's what leaders do. They remind people what's possible through their own persistence. The most dependable, the most grounded in purpose. It's about choosing to work, to care, to push, not because you feel like it, but because it matters. Every time you force yourself to do the work when you don't feel like it, you reinforce a culture, whether in your team, your family, or just within yourself, that says, we do hard things. We don't run from discomfort. We keep going, even when it's hard. That kind of culture isn't built with motivational speeches or one-off bursts of energy. It's built with habits, with character, with relentless, quiet commitment. It's easy to think that the world needs more charisma, more big personalities. But what the world really needs, and what people are aching for, is authenticity. Someone who's real, who doesn't pretend to have it all together, who admits when it's hard, but doesn't let that be an excuse, who leads not with perfection, but with persistence. That's why forcing yourself to work when you don't feel like it isn't just about productivity, it's about trust. People trust those who show up, who don't hide, who take responsibility even when things don't go according to plan. That trust becomes the foundation of everything. Teams, relationships, organizations, movements. You don't inspire others by being superhuman, you inspire them by being human. By struggling but still choosing to lead, by being afraid but still taking action, by failing but still showing up the next day. There's nothing glamorous about it, but that's exactly what makes it powerful, because if you only show up when it's easy, you're not leading, you're reacting. But when you choose to act even when everything inside you says don't, you're declaring, this matters more than my comfort. That's leadership. So the next time you want to skip the work, delay the effort, or take the easier road, pause. Ask yourself, what kind of example am I setting right now? Who will I become if I stop here? And then ask, who do I want to be? Because in that small decision to do the work anyway, you are becoming someone stronger, someone more dependable, someone others can count on, someone you can count on. That's not about being productive. That's about being a leader. And that choice to lead yourself first, even when it's hard, is the beginning of every meaningful change. There's a dangerous lie hidden in the culture we live in, that greatness is the result of explosive effort. that breakthroughs happen in moments, that success is this dramatic turning point when everything suddenly changes. That's not how it works. The truth is far less romantic, but far more powerful. Greatness is not built in a day. It's not the result of one massive push. It's built in the quiet, mundane, and often unseen decision to show up again and again, to do the work when it's not exciting, to stay committed when no one claps, to move forward when progress feels invisible. That's the stuff real success is made of. Consistency, not intensity. Every time you force yourself to work when you don't feel like it, you're casting a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. Not in a dramatic, headline-worthy way, but in a way that compounds over time. Because the truth is, your future isn't built in one moment of inspiration. It's built in thousands of tiny, difficult choices. The ones no one sees, the ones only you know you made. And that's what separates those who build something lasting from those who stop too soon. The people who finish, the people who grow, who lead, who rise, aren't the ones who always feel ready. They're the ones who keep going even when they're not. Who trust the process enough to stay in motion even when it's slow. We live in a world addicted to outcomes. We celebrate the finish line more than the training. We highlight the promotion, not the quiet nights of preparation. But ask anyone who's built something real, something that actually matters, and they'll tell you the real work is boring, it's repetitive, it's frustrating, it doesn't feel like magic, it feels like discipline. But over time, that discipline becomes identity. You stop having to convince yourself to start. You just start. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you are now. And that shift from effort to identity is the moment everything changes. You're not just forcing yourself to work, you're becoming someone who works. Someone who follows through, someone who honors their future self enough to put in the effort even when it's uncomfortable. And that kind of consistency is rare. It's also powerful. When we look at people who seem unshakable, who always show up, who keep going, we assume they have something special. Willpower, talent, discipline. But what they really have is something quieter. A clear reason. A strong enough why. They're not just working for the sake of it. They're working because it connects to something deeper. A belief. A responsibility. A calling. And when you have that, when your actions are rooted in something meaningful, you stop needing motivation every day. You don't need to be hyped up. You don't need a pep talk because the mission speaks louder than your mood. That's the shift that changes everything. When you stop asking, do I feel like it? And start asking, what does this moment require of me? That's when you move differently. That's when you build momentum that lasts. Not just a few days, but years. It's easy to confuse consistency with perfection. They're not the same. Perfection is brittle. It breaks the moment you slip. But consistency is resilient. It allows for failure, for rest, for humanity. What matters isn't that you never miss a step. It's that you never stop walking. Progress is not linear. It never has been. You'll have days when everything flows and others when you feel stuck. That's normal. What matters is that you return. Again and again, that you remember. The goal isn't to feel amazing every day. The goal is to stay committed to something bigger than how you feel. We are all shaped by what we repeat. Every day you are reinforcing a version of yourself, whether you realize it or not. And every time you choose to act in alignment with your future, even when it's difficult, you're casting another vote for the kind of leader, creator, teammate, or human you want to be. Eventually, others will see the results. They'll call it talent, they'll call it luck, they'll say you're driven or gifted, but you'll know the truth. You'll know that it wasn't one big moment that made the difference. It was the days you almost didn't show up, but did. It was the effort you gave when no one was looking. It was the inner battle you won quietly, without recognition. That's what greatness is built on. Not hype, not instant results, but a long string of ordinary days stacked with extraordinary intention. And that's the invitation, not to be perfect, not to feel unstoppable, but to keep going, especially when it's hard, to remember that even your worst days are still part of your story. That the resistance you feel isn't a reason to stop, it's a reason to lean in. You won't always feel inspired, but you can always choose to be consistent. You can always return to the work, and in doing so, you're not just making progress, you're making character. The people who change things, who shape cultures, who leave legacies, they're not the ones who work only when it's easy. They're the ones who find a way to stay in motion no matter what. So yes, there will be mornings when it's hard to start, days when the effort feels wasted, moments when you wonder if any of it matters. But in those moments, remind yourself, this is how it's supposed to feel. It's not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're building something real. Keep going, not because it's easy, not because you're motivated, but because you're committed, because you said yes to the future, because the person you're becoming is worth it. And in the end, it won't be the big loud days that define you. It will be the quiet ones. The days you showed up anyway.